I can still feel the chill crawling up my spine, the way my heart pounded in my chest as I tried to convince myself it was all just my imagination. But it wasn't. I know what I saw, and I'll never forget that night. It was a Friday, and I had been looking forward to the sleepover at James' house for weeks. James and I had been best friends since elementary school, and now, at 15, our favorite way to spend the weekends was playing video games until the early hours of the morning. His parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving us the entire house to ourselves. It was perfect. The evening started out like any other. We'd grabbed a bunch of snacks, chips, sodas, candy, and everything we could possibly need for a night of gaming. James' house was huge, almost too big, especially when no one was around, but it was fun to have the place to ourselves, and we joked about throwing the ultimate party sometime. We set up the living room, the biggest TV in the house, giving us the perfect screen for multiplayer mayhem. The time flew by as we battled each other in some of our favorite games, laughing and trash talking to each other. It was just past midnight when things started to get weird. I was in the middle of a particularly intense match when I noticed James had stopped playing. His character just stood there on the screen, not moving, as mine knocked him out with ease. "Hey, you okay, man?" I asked, thinking he might be dozing off. But James wasn't looking at the screen. His eyes were locked on the large window behind me, his face pale and frozen in an expression I couldn't quite read. "James?" I repeated, turning around to see what had caught his attention. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, some trick of the moonlight filtering through the trees outside. But the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't a shadow at all. It was a figure, standing perfectly still just beyond the glass, its face inches from the window. My breath caught in my throat as I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch out impossibly far. Its skin, or whatever it was sticky pale, almost translucent, with veins pulsing beneath the surface. But it was the face that terrified me the most. It had no eyes, just dark, empty sockets that seemed to stare straight through me. Its mouth was wide, too wide, like a gash carved into its face, and it was smiling, a slow, deliberate smile that sent ice down my spine. "What the hell is that?" James whispered, his voice trembling. I don't know," I stammered, unable to tear my eyes away from the thing at the window. We both stood there, frozen in place, as the thing continued to watch us, that horrible smile never wavering for what felt like an eternity. None of us moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the video game, now a distant, unimportant noise in the background. Then, suddenly, it moved. It didn't move like a person would. There was no shift in its weight, no natural motion. One second it was there, and the next it was gone, replaced by darkness. My heart leaped into my throat, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. "Did you see that?" I gasped, my voice higher than I intended. James nodded, his face pale and sweaty. Yeah, I saw it." We both stared at the window, expected the thing to reappear at any moment, but it didn't. The only thing staring back at us now was our own terrified reflections. "What do we do?" I asked, panic starting to set in. "Should we call someone? The police? And tell them what? That there's something outside watching us?" "They'll think we're crazy," James replied, his voice shaky but logical. He was right. Of course, no one would believe us. And even if they did, what would they do? It wasn't like this thing was human. "We should lock the doors," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady, just in case. James nodded again, and we both scrambled to the front door, double checking the lock. The house suddenly felt a lot bigger, a lot emptier. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside seemed amplified, like the house itself was alive and aware of our fear. We made our way through the house, checking all the windows and doors, making sure everything was locked tight. But no matter how secure we made the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough, that whatever that thing was, locks and walls, wouldn't stop it. When we finally finished, we ended up back in the living room, both of us too scared to suggest going to bed. The TV was still on, the game forgotten, but neither of us made a move to turn it off. It was the only thing keeping the oppressive silence at bay. What do you think it was? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, not wanting to say what I was thinking. I don't know, but it wasn't human. Do you think it's still out there? He asked, glancing nervously toward the window. I don't know, maybe. We sat there in silence for a long time, the fear settling into a dull, constant ache in my chest. I couldn't stop picturing that thing's face, those empty sockets, that awful smile. I wanted to believe it was just some kind of nightmare, that I would wake up and everything would be normal again. But I knew better. Eventually, exhaustion began to creep in, and we both started to nod off, despite our best efforts to stay awake. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up to a noise, a soft, almost imperceptible tapping. My eyes snapped open, and I held my breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window. I turned my head slowly, every muscle in my body tense, and there it was again, the thing from earlier, standing right outside the window, tapping on the glass with one long bony finger. It wasn't smiling anymore. It looked angry. James, I hissed, shaking him awake. James, it's back. He woke up, his eyes going wide as he saw the thing at the window. Oh God, he whispered, backing away until he was pressed against the far wall. The thing continued to tap on the glass, its head tilting to the side as if it was studying us. I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could do was watch as it slowly reached out with its other hand and started to push against the window. The glass began to creak under the pressure, and I felt a surge of terror unlike anything I'd ever felt before. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice trembling. Now. James didn't need to be told twice. We both bolted to the front door, adrenaline fueling our every move. The tapping grew louder, more frantic, as if the thing knew we were trying to escape. I could hear the glass beginning to crack as we fumbled with the lock, our hands shaking too much to get a good grip. Finally, the door swung open, and we sprinted outside into the cool night air. We didn't stop running until we were halfway down the street. Too terrified to look back, the wind howled through the trees, and every shadow seemed to move, to shift, as if the thing was still following us. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of my house. Breathless and shaking, my parents were asleep, oblivious to the nightmare we had just escaped. We didn't wake them, didn't tell them what had happened. I'm not sure why. Maybe we were too scared to say it out loud, too afraid that speaking about it would make it real. James stayed over at my place that night, neither of us daring to close our eyes. We sat in my room, the door locked, jumping at every little sound. Morning couldn't come fast enough. It's been a few weeks since that night, but I still can't shake the feeling that it's not over, that the thing at the window is still out there, watching, waiting. I've tried to tell myself that it was just a hallucination, a trick of the light, but deep down, I know it wasn't. I haven't been back to James's house since. He says his parents don't believe him, that they think it was just some prank or his imagination running wild. But I know the truth. I see it in his eyes, the same fear that I can't seem to get rid of. We both know what we saw, and we both know it wasn't human. And every time I'm alone in my room, every time the house is too quiet, I can't help but listen for that sound, that soft, steady tapping, because I know that one day it'll come back. And when it does, I don't think we'll be able to escape it again.